A water-damaged parchment leaf sits in a cedar box inside the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, Ethiopia, part of a manuscript collection that has not left that building in over 400 years. It contains chapters from the Book of Enoch. Church leaders voted Enoch out of Scripture in 364 CE, banned it, buried it, called it dangerous. For 17 centuries it stayed that way. Then in 1947, 11 copies surfaced in the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, more copies than were found of Deuteronomy, more than Exodus, more than most books that stayed in the Bible. Scholars who translated the oldest fragments found something no one expected. Enoch describes a prison beneath the ocean floor, not a metaphor, a sealed chamber, constructed before the flood, holding beings God chose not to destroy, only to contain. He names what's inside. He describes the door. He records why it cannot be opened until the final judgment. In the next several minutes, you will see what the text says, what modern deep-sea research has found in the same location, and why access to the relevant manuscripts has been restricted since 1974. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week we uncover what was removed from Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The passage appears in two places. The first is Enoch chapters 17 through 19, part of the Book of the Watchers. The second is Enoch chapter 69 in the Parables section. Fragment 4Q206, stored at the Israel Museum's Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, contains Aramaic text from chapter 17 dated to around 100 BCE. The Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscript at Aksum contains the complete version of both sections. Dr. Michael Knibb, whose 1978 Oxford translation remains the standard English edition for scholars, identified chapter 17 as containing geographical language inconsistent with symbolic literature. He meant the text uses compass directions, depth measurements, specific terrain features, not the vague spiritual geography of apocalyptic writing. Something more like a survey report, the kind a geologist files after mapping a site. And this is where it gets disturbing. Chapter 17, verse 5, describes Enoch being taken to a place beyond the Great Sea, where the waters above and below converge. The Ge'ez uses Bahi Abi, the Great Sea, not a river, not a lake, an ocean. Verse 7 describes the floor of this place as dark stone, smooth and cold, unlike any stone found on land. Dark, smooth, cold. Enoch is describing basalt, the volcanic rock that forms the ocean floor. He had no way to know the ocean floor is paved in basalt. No ancient human had seen it. The deepest any ancient person could dive was perhaps 100 feet. The ocean floor sits 2 miles down on average and nearly 7 miles deep at its lowest. Yet Enoch describes it accurately. What we're looking at is a three-part description of what lies beneath. The text begins with the structure. Chapter 18, verse 9 says Enoch was shown a deep place in the earth, and columns of fire descended into it, and I saw pillars of fire falling downward without end. This is hydrothermal activity, underwater volcanic vents that shoot superheated water into the ocean, some reaching temperatures of 750 degrees Fahrenheit. The ancients called them pillars of fire. We call them black smokers. Same phenomenon, different century. But the text doesn't stop there. What follows in chapter 18, verse 11, is the prison itself. Enoch writes, "And beyond the pillars of fire I saw a great house built from stones of hail and ice, and it had walls of fire around it, and a door I could not open. A house of ice surrounded by fire, impenetrable." Chapter 19, verse 1 identifies what is inside. The angel Uriel tells Enoch, "Here shall the angels who cohabited with women stand. Their spirits, taking many forms, defile men and lead them astray to offer sacrifices to demons as to gods." These are not the same as the watchers imprisoned beneath the desert. These are different beings. Their spirits, the text says, are still active, still able to influence events on the surface, even while the bodies are sealed below. The prison contains their physical forms. Their influence escapes through the door. What follows in chapter 69 is stranger still. Enoch provides the name of the being who manages the seal. Verse 14 names him as Casbiel, described as the one who revealed the secret oath to the holy Michael. The oath is what keeps the door shut. Chapter 69, verse 15 records the oath itself. The oath Bika, sworn before creation. Before the ocean existed, before the floor was laid, the seal on this prison was agreed upon before the prison was built. It was planned. The containment of whatever lives beneath the ocean floor was not a response to an emergency. It was a design decision. The distinction matters. Enoch describes two separate categories of imprisoned beings. The Watchers under the Judean desert are awaiting trial. They are held in temporary detention before sentencing. But the beings beneath the ocean are described differently. Chapter 19, verse 3 adds a detail most Western translations drop entirely. The Ge'ez says their imprisonment is li'alam we'aleim, for ages upon ages. That phrase appears elsewhere in Enoch, only in context describing permanent conditions. Not a holding cell, a permanent installation. Whatever is under the ocean floor was not detained to await judgment. It was removed from the world and sealed away from it indefinitely. What makes this detail unsettling is the reason given. God did not destroy these beings. He could have. The flood destroyed everything on the surface. But these beings were sealed rather than eliminated. Chapter 10, verse 9 records God's instruction, destroy all the souls of lust and the children of the Watchers. Surface beings, destroyed. But chapter 19 describes a different class of being that receives a different sentence, containment instead of destruction, sealing instead of annihilation. The text implies these beings could not simply be unmade, they had to be held. The architecture Enoch describes is worth slowing down on. He doesn't say a dark place, he gives materials. Chapter 18, verse 9 specifies the walls are made of stones of hail, ice compressed under enormous pressure, white, blue, and translucent. The floor is that dark basalt, smooth and cold to the touch. Fire burns along the perimeter walls but does not melt the ice. Enoch doesn't try to explain that, he just records it, the way a first responder writes what they saw without editorializing. Outside the structure, pillars of superheated water rise from vents in the ocean floor, glowing orange and red in the surrounding darkness. He describes the sound as constant, a low, sustained roar, like something pressurized and contained. The door is set into the ice wall on the side facing away from the vents. Enoch writes that he reached toward it and Uriel stopped him. No explanation given, just, do not touch it. There is one more detail from the same passage that Western editions strip out entirely. The Ge'ez text adds that the door has no handle on the outside. It can only be opened from within. Enoch notes this without comment. Uriel doesn't explain it. The text moves on. But the implication sits there. Whatever is inside is not trying to get out, or it cannot. Either way, the door was not designed for a visitor. It was designed for a warden. And then comes the part the translators removed. The standard English editions of Enoch, including R.H. Charles's 1906 translation, that most people still reference, render chapter 17 verse 8 as, I saw the treasuries of the winds, treasury of winds. Abstract, poetic. The Ge'ez manuscript in Aksum is more specific. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the 1983 Oxford translation directly from the Ethiopian manuscripts, noted in a private correspondence later archived at the University of Manchester that the Ge'ez phrase is Adar Nafas, which carries a secondary meaning, the reservoir of breath, not winds in the meteorological sense. The breath of living things, stored, held. The full passage he wrote implies the place beneath the ocean contains something alive that is still breathing. Here's what the translators left out. That phrase, the reservoir of breath, appears one more time in Enoch. Chapter 61, verse 5, uses the same Ge'ez construction to describe the breath of the righteous dead being preserved until resurrection. Same word, same construction. Two different contexts. In chapter 61, it's the breath of souls awaiting resurrection. In chapter 17, it's the breath of whatever is sealed beneath the ocean floor. The parallel is exact. The text is using resurrection language to describe the contents of a deep-sea prison. What modern readers don't realize is how specifically this matches what oceanographers have found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. In 2020, a team at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology drilled sediment cores from the ocean floor of the South Pacific Gyre, the most lifeless region of the deepest ocean on Earth. They found something alive inside the cores, microbial cells, dormant, buried under more than 200 feet of sediment in rock layers over 100 million years old. The cells were still metabolically active. They were still breathing, still consuming oxygen, at a rate so slow that one breath, by their measurement, takes 10,000 years. The lead researcher, Dr. Yuki Morono, described the organisms as existing in a state that had no scientific category, not alive in any normal sense, not dead, just waiting. Enoch wrote this around 200 BCE. In 2020, scientists found living things beneath the ocean floor, metabolizing at rates that make a human lifetime look like a blink, sealed in sediment that formed before the dinosaurs existed. The text describes living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The science found living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The parallel is not metaphorical, it is structural. The implications of the Morono study were significant enough that a second team, this one from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, conducted a follow-up survey in 2022. They drilled sediment cores from the North Pacific and found the same thing. Living cells. Ancient, dormant, still metabolizing. The Woods Hole team published their results in Nature Microbiology and noted that the organisms showed genetic markers unlike anything in the surface biosphere. They were not surface life that had sunk to the floor and adapted. They were something else. The paper's authors described them as representing a previously unknown branch of life that has been isolated from the surface world for geological timescales. Isolated, sealed, alive, a previously unknown branch. Enoch said the same thing in different language 2,000 years earlier. He said what is down there is not like what is up here. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders removed Enoch from the biblical canon and called it dangerous. The specific problem with chapters 17 through 19 was geographical. The church's cosmology placed the abyss below the earth, beneath the land. Enoch placed a prison below the ocean, different location. Testable claim. If the prison is under the ocean, someone could look for it. That made the text threatening in a way that purely symbolic apocalyptic writing was not. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, dismissed Enoch's ocean chapters as confused accounts of creation unworthy of serious study. Augustine, writing in the City of God around 410 CE, argued the ocean abyss passages were borrowed from pagan sea mythology. Neither man addressed the geological specifics. Neither explained why Enoch knew the ocean floor was made of dark, smooth stone. The Ethiopian church, operating independently of Rome, kept Enoch in its canon. When the Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3 Ge'ez manuscripts to Europe in 1773, the ocean chapters attracted immediate theological controversy. Oxford scholars who examined them called the deep-sea prison passages irreconcilable with Mosaic cosmology in an 1821 review. R.H. Charles, producing his 1906 English translation, added a footnote suggesting the ocean house of ice was probably a garbled memory of Arctic exploration. No ancient Judean writer had been to the Arctic. Charles had no explanation. He offered one anyway. There is one more layer to the suppression that most researchers miss. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were first cataloged in the early 1950s, the ocean floor chapters of Enoch were assigned to the lowest publication priority. The scholars managing the scroll publication project, a team coordinated by the École Biblique in Jerusalem, divided the fragments into categories. Fragments touching on law, calendar, and community rules were published first. Fragments touching on cosmology, angiology, and geography were placed in the final category. The Enoch fragments describing the ocean prison sat unpublished for over 30 years after their discovery. They finally appeared in 1976, when Joseph Milik released his edition, and even then his commentary described the ocean floor passages as mythological elaborations without geographical content. The man who spent decades studying these texts dismissed the most specific geographical passage in the entire Enochic corpus as content-free mythology. But what the standard translation hides is this. The Aksum manuscript contains a passage in chapter 17 that does not appear in any Western edition. Access to the Aksum manuscripts was restricted after 1974, following the Ethiopian Revolution, when the new government classified church archives as national cultural property. Dr. James Vanderkam of the University of Notre Dame, one of the foremost living authorities on Enoch scholarship, applied for access in 1988, denied. He applied again in 1997, denied. In a 2001 interview with Biblical Archaeology Review, Vanderkam stated that at least 3 passages in the Ge'ez manuscript tradition are known to scholars through secondary references, but have not been available for direct examination in over 50 years. Now here's where it gets active. In 2019, a Norwegian oceanographic research vessel called the Kronprins Haakon, operated by the Institute of Marine Research, conducted a deep-sea survey of a geologically anomalous region in the South Atlantic, approximately 800 miles west of Namibia. The survey detected acoustic signatures at a depth of 4 miles that the ship's instruments could not classify. The lead researcher filed a preliminary report with the Norwegian Research Council, describing the signals as inconsistent with known geological or biological sources at that depth. The report was classified as a restricted internal document. A summary was published in 2021, with the acoustic data section redacted. 2 requests under Norwegian Freedom of Information law to access the full report have been declined. Now, let me be clear, I'm not saying there are ancient supernatural beings sitting in a palace of ice at the bottom of the Pacific, still breathing, waiting for the end of the world. The Book of Enoch is not a submersible mission briefing. But what the text describes when you read it carefully matches what modern deep ocean science keeps finding: living things in the deepest, darkest, coldest parts of the ocean floor, metabolizing in slow motion, sealed under layers of rock and sediment, not dead, not alive in any normal sense, just persisting. Enoch had no submersible, no sediment drill, no sonar, no way to know anything about the ocean below a few hundred feet. He should not describe a sealed structure on a dark stone floor with pillars of fire beside it, containing something that breathes. And yet the text sits there, in Ge'ez and Aramaic, in fragments found at Qumran, in manuscripts locked in a church in Aksum, saying what it has said for over 2,000 years. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If the ocean floor is made of dark, smooth volcanic basalt, if hydrothermal vents shoot fire upward from that floor, if dormant living organisms exist sealed beneath centuries of sediment in the deepest ocean, and if a text written before the Roman Empire describes all of that in plain language alongside a sealed prison containing beings that are not dead, then the text is not mythology, it is documentation. Enoch went somewhere, or was shown something, that gave him knowledge no person in 2000 BCE should possess. He recorded it with the same matter-of-fact tone you'd use writing a property deed. The chamber he describes: dark stone floor, walls of fire, house of ice. The door that cannot be opened is either a symbol we have misread for 22 centuries, or it is exactly what Enoch says, a real structure in a real place, beneath the real ocean, containing something that is still sealed, still breathing, and still waiting for the moment the door opens. The manuscripts remain in Aksum, inaccessible behind church walls and government restriction. Fragment 4Q206 sits in Jerusalem under glass. The sediment cores from the South Pacific Gyre are cataloged in a laboratory in Japan. The acoustic data from the South Atlantic sits in a redacted file in Oslo. And in a text the church removed from the Bible 17 centuries ago, a man named Enoch stands at the edge of a dark ocean floor, shown a sealed door by an angel, told it will not be opened until the judgment. The door is still there, the seal is still intact, and whatever is inside is still breathing, exactly the way Enoch said it was.